So now we have time for some questions from you all. And go ahead and type them in the chat and please indicate who the question is for as well. And I see that there is a little discussion in the chat already related to Kelsey's talk. And it does look like it was answered in the chat, but while we're waiting for you all to think of your questions, I can go ahead and read that out for everyone. Let's see, the question from Carl Hibbets to Kelsey was, did you mention the only handheld instruments the astronauts would be using would be CCD or CMOS cameras? And David Melendres mentions that he'll be talking about that later today when giving the Orion imagery summary. But that he points out that Nikon D5 with an 80 to 400 millimeter lens will be used for out the window shots.
Yeah, while we're waiting, Julie, I can just say just a little bit more while we're waiting for folks to enter their questions. Yeah, so for Artemis 2 specifically, like I said, we'll be relying on crew observations out the window and photography from the handheld camera that Dave summarizes and from vehicle cameras, which I think Dave is also going to mention later. So I'll just leave that to him for later. But we'll also be able to use the tablet to record the observation. So we're really relying on that handheld Nikon D5 and the tablet. And I see we have another question, so I'll kick it back to Julie.
Okay. For Mark, your question is from, oops, sorry, it just scrolled off the screen for me. Oh dear.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Mark Elowitz. Yeah, I don't have the answer for that one. That's kind of above my pay grade. So I'm going to take that one. But I think what we should say is that as we're planning some of these early missions and we have multiple elements in the architecture, we're definitely taking a look at what sort of alternate missions we can do if we run into a problem during that mission execution to try to enable as much of the mission objectives that we can find.
Okay, thanks. And that was related to SpaceX's Starship program. And for Kelsey, there's a question from Alex Longo. It's exciting to watch the Artemis 2 science plan develop meeting by meeting. Would you mind sharing any specific examples of scientific objectives or photography targets which you have prioritized?
First of all, I really appreciate that question and comment because it's totally true. You nailed it. And I'm glad you noticed that every time we do talk about this publicly, there are updates. There's a lot going on. Noah and I can both attest, this has been an extremely active mission over the last few months, and we're anticipating a lot more action to come over the next few months. So I appreciate the comment and the question. The second part of the question about sharing specific examples. So we really are, and Mark highlighted this as well, mileage varies based on launch date and associated illumination conditions. So we really are trying to cast as wide a net as possible for our imaging targets for our lunar science objectives, because we just don't know what's going to be possible on the exact launch date. So we're really trying to keep a broad list that then once we see what the launch date is, we're going to be able to narrow in quickly on what's possible and send that target list up to the crew. So we're working on pulling that together actually this month. So the next meeting that you hear me give an update on, we can share a lot more detail about this specific question. And then I'll also actually be a bit sneaky and turn the question back on you and say that we'd really like to hear from you guys on any observations and images you want to see. And the breakouts are specifically designed to gather that feedback. So I'll answer the question in summary by saying, expect a detailed update on this in the next meeting, the next public meeting that we give an update on. And then we really do want to hear from you today. So thanks for the comment and the question.
All right. So the next question is from Dan Adamo. Sorry if I messed up your name. And who is wondering, are they receiving sonography training for 2 and subsequent missions?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. We did have sort of very late integration with the public affairs team for Artemis 1. I can say that we have already heavily integrated with them for Artemis 2. So we will definitely be working really hard to make sure that everybody involved in the mission, with public affairs, the crew, the flight control team, everybody receives the necessary training, and that includes what you're asking about. So definitely appreciate the question. And yes, we anticipate, in fact, we have already started that process for Artemis 2.
Okay. And then there's a comment from David related to an earlier question. And Polly C has the next question, who asks, will the Nikon D5 be radiometrically calibrated? Presumably reading into that, maybe that is for David Melendres.
And I think Dave answered
okay,
it
yeah. Sorry, it's just
in the chat.
going a little slow here. Yep. Okay. So no, it's a standard D5, just flown as on ISS. And the next question appears to be from Rachel Berry about, is the tablet mentioned for only for capturing audio?
Yeah, I can answer that. So Dave did put some specs on the tablet in the chat, which is totally true. It's a Microsoft Surface Pro tablet, and it will be used for standard office applications. Specifically speaking for our applications for the mission, though, the tablet will be used for capturing audio. It will also be used for a review of a lunar geography file that we have put together and that the crew will be using to just refresh their memories during the 4 days out to the moon. It will also be used to review the target and the imaging plan for the crew that is sent to the crew post-launch once we see the exact launch conditions and the associated elimination conditions we expect. And it will be also used on the return from the moon back to the Earth to capture any thoughts and impressions that the crew had during the lunar flyby. So it will be used by the crew for a whole host of other reasons through the apps that Dave references in the chat, but specifically for our lunar science objectives, that's how we envision using the tablet. I actually, while I'm open mic, have a question for Mark, Julie, if that's okay.
Yes.
Because I think there's no more in the chat. Mark, I was wondering, I really appreciated those videos from 2 and 3, and I'm fortunate enough to have the slides on my end, and I just like want to watch them on loop. But do you have any early thoughts on anything 4+, or has the work that you showed today really been centered on Artemis 2 and 3 and those trajectories and associated lunar views?
Yeah, so we've looked at missions beyond Artemis 3. We've looked at 4 and 5. What we're seeing in the manifests that are out there are that the missions are going to be going to the gateway, which is in the NRHO, which from the perspective of maybe this discussion here, they're going to get the same sorts of repeating views over and over and over again, with the closest approach being around the North Pole and, of course, the farthest part, which we're loitering over the South Pole. And so that begins to repeat itself in a very repeatable fashion. And so depending on the launch day and the time of the year, you're going to get different sites, obviously, that are going to be illuminated. I'm sure this cohort here is very familiar with the complications of the lighting geometries of the South Pole. And so, having the gateway in the NRHO for extended periods of time, and if it has capabilities, will definitely provide a good platform for folks to take a look at the lunar surface.
Thanks. I think that would be really helpful. Well, it's helpful just for broad awareness, but also for the breakout discussions for the community to frame what's possible for crew time in orbit for lunar science. So thank you.
Yep. Yeah, I was kind of wondering some similar questions myself, but I will continue with the contributed questions here. So Space Benefit asks, could commercial payloads be part of Artemis 2?
Yeah, so quickly, Dave did provide totally the answer on that in the chat. National Geographic is flying a small series of cameras to document the flight, but other than that, we do not have plans, especially for lunar science, to fly commercial payloads.
Okay. And then, unless it's already been answered in the chat, and I haven't seen it yet, Kirby at Runyon asks for gateways and RHO, any ideas on the paralunar altitude, particularly with regards to maybe neutron spectroscopy measurements?
So I can speak a little bit to the paralunar altitude. In the video I showed, it was roughly 3,300 kilometers, but the NRHO varies in a little bit. So we're seeing some passes that go as low as 1,600 kilometers, as shown in the video. But we'll continue to study the NRHO and see, particularly on what orbits will have what sort of altitudes.
Yeah, thanks. It's like it strikes me that the speed of the pass might also be a useful parameter to have along with that. Okay, so I'm seeing a couple more comments popping up.
Thanking Rachel for her question and comment. So I think we're good to go to break, Julie.
All right. Shall I do one final call for questions? Everyone that
I
went.
think we're over time actually. So
Oh, are we?
might
Oh, the
just
purple
go
is
to break.
back. Okay, so sorry. All right. All right, thanks everyone.